In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the mighty Hasselblad 503CW. Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, my name's Stephen Milner. I'm a film landscape photographer based in New Zealand, and if you'd like to check out some more of my videos, please subscribe to my channel and that'd be greatly appreciated. I hope you guys are all having a great Christmas and you've got lots of nice plans for the New Year celebrations, and I really hope you enjoy that. So before we get into the video, I want to quickly go through and do a very short history lesson on the Hasselblad cameras, because I think it's worth mentioning because these are very special cameras. So the Hasselblad 503CW is part of the Hasselblad 500 series cameras, and it was the pinnacle of Victor Hasselblad's V system cameras. The 500C, which was the first ever film camera from Hasselblad of the 500 series, went into production in 1957. And in 1962, amazingly, NASA took the 500C into space for the very first time, and that was the start of a very special relationship between NASA and Hasselblad for a very long time. Over the years, there's been a number of different iterations of the cameras. There was the 500CM, which was the second generation camera, that came out in 1970. Then there was the 503CX, that came out in 1988. There was the 503CXI and the 501C, they came out in 1994. There was the 503CW, which is this camera, and that came out in 1996. And then there was the 503CWD, which came out in 2006, which is pretty much the same camera as this one, but it has some electronic cables in it that allow tethering between the lens and a digital back that slots on the back. The V system lenses are interchangeable with the 200 and 2000 series cameras, which is quite unique, and I think it's fair to say that these cameras are for professionals. They are designed as a professional tool, and very interestingly, they're all handmade in Sweden, which is very cool. So I hope you enjoyed that brief history lesson, and there's going to be a few things that we're going to cover today, and I put quite a bit of thought into this, so I've made a few notes here, so I'm going to be referring to them as we go through this. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover why I chose this camera, we're going to cover what are the contenders, we're going to cover the general operating procedures, and we're also going to talk about the lens options and the accessories, what I like about the camera, what I think could be different, who is this camera for. But before we get into all that, I'm going to put up a short slideshow now of some of the images that I've taken over the last few months with this camera for you to check out. So I hope you enjoyed that short slideshow. I have to say that I've really enjoyed using this camera over the last few months, and I really do think it's capable of making some beautiful, beautiful images in the right hands. Now then, why did I choose this camera? Well, there's a few reasons, and the first one is I really do love the square crop, the 6x6 or 1:1 aspect ratio. I really enjoy that format. Another reason is it has interchangeable film backs, so I'm able to shoot more than one film on one scene without having to take off my camera and put a new one on. I just take the film back off and put a different one on. What else do I love about this camera? The fact that you can put digital backs on the back of this camera if you choose to. So not only can it be a film camera, but it could also be a digital camera. And I also like it how it is an SLR design. So that means single lens reflex. So basically when I open up the viewfinder, I'm actually looking through the lens, which is good because I'm a landscape photographer and it helps with compositions, and I also use filters so I can see the effects of the filters live through the viewfinder. So what are the alternative options? Well, there's a few out there, and I'm going to focus on SLR type cameras that have a similar format to this, the kind of square with interchangeable back options type cameras. So the first one to mention is the Bronica SQ, and I'll put some images up of these cameras as I'm talking. So the Bronica SQ is a square 6x6 option, and also the Bronica EC is a square 6x6 option. There's also the Rollei HY6, which is a German-made camera, and we've got the Rolleiflex SLX and 6000 series cameras. There's also some other similar type cameras that have interchangeable backs, which are not 6x6 format, they're 6.4.5 format, and they're made by Mamiya and Bronica, and there's plenty of options to choose from. Now I think I've covered all the cameras there, but if you think I've missed any of them, please leave a comment down below and tell me some of the other cameras that do 6x6 in this format. There are some other cameras that are not in this format, like the Mamiya 6 for example. I'd also be interested to hear if there's any of those cameras that you think are worth mentioning. So I thought it'd be quite good to go through and look at the general operating procedures of the Hasselblad 503CW. So we'll start off with the bottom of the camera, and on the bottom here we have a plate where we can attach our tripod brackets, and I had an Arca Swiss type bracket on here, it works fine. So then we move around to the front of the camera, and obviously we have the lens on the front of the camera here, and to release the lens there's a button here, we just press that and rotate it out. And as you can see inside there's a mirror. The mirror basically projects the image up through the viewfinder, like all of the SLR type cameras. And to put the lens back on, you just basically line up the red dots on the lens and the body, and you just push it in and then rotate it round. So on the back here we have a film back. These are removable, and we'll get into that a bit more detail in a second. But it has a dark slide here that you can pull out. So you basically pull that out and slide that into the back here. On the version 4 backs they have this holder which holds the dark slide, and as you can see in the back here as well, there's a place to put your film tabs so you know what film you've got in the back. One thing to mention is that you can't remove the back with the dark slide out, and equally when the dark slide is in position you're not able to fire the lens off either. So in terms of letting the lens go, in terms of firing the shutter, there is a button here that you press, and then on the side here this is how you wind the film on. I'll just do that again, and you can also actually flick this little lever out and use that if you want to use that. You just basically wind it on until it's done. Now, like I've already said, the lenses on these are a leaf shutter type, which basically means the shutter is in the lens themselves. But what's quite unique to the Hasselblad is there's a set of barn doors on the back of the camera here, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I take the back off, and if you look at the back here, there's a set of barn doors, and as I press the shutter they open up and then they close. So just one thing to mention when using this camera, and this is really relevant if you're using slower shutter speeds, is that the leaf shutter is timed, so there's a time set to that. It's either bulb, 1 second, half a second, all the way up to 500th of a second. But these barn doors on the back, they just operate at a normal running speed, they're not timed. So what can happen if you've got your shutter speed set to quite low and you just press the button, I don't know if you could hear that through the microphone, but the barn doors open and close, but the shutter's still running, and that's a common mistake that I've seen, and I've made that mistake myself. And the reason that happens is that when you fire the shutter off, when you're using longer exposures, you're supposed to keep your finger on the shutter release button itself and then let it go, and then the barn doors close. So I'll just do that the other way around so you can see. So you just press it, the shutter goes, and then you release it and the barn doors close. When you're doing fast shutter speeds, it's not so much of a problem because the shutter, the leaf shutter in the lens, moves a lot quicker than the barn doors. So you can just press it quite quickly when you're using fast shutter speeds. So here's the film back, and like I've already said, there's a dark slide. There's a little indication here on the side of it that tells you roughly how far through the film you are. There's also a counter on the back you can see here, and to take this out you basically lift up this. This is how you change the film. You basically lift up here and rotate it and it pops out, and there you have the film magazine itself. And perhaps I'll do a separate video on how to load these. I won't get bogged down in that now, but there's also plenty of videos online if you want to check that out. So you basically load your film and then you just push it back in nice and gently, push it into place, and then rotate that and lock it into position. And once you put your film in, there's a little winder here that you lift up and you wind it on. You just basically rotate this until it stops, and that basically advances the film to the position where it's ready to go for slide number 1. To put the film magazine on, there's basically a couple of little hooks here on the bottom that catch the holes on the bottom, and when you put in the film back on, I recommend you do this with a bit of care because you can damage them. You just want to line those holes up, and don't just don't do it in a rush. Take some time with this one, just put them on, gently push it up, make sure it's lining up correctly, and then press the button and lock it into place. Don't slam it shut because you damage the camera. So other thing to mention is on the side here we've got a mirror lockup feature. So this is great if you're doing long exposures and you're working from a tripod, and you don't want any camera vibration from the mirror and the barn doors moving. So basically when you press this, I've got the dark slide in, so that's the dark slide function working. Doesn't let you take images when the dark slide's in position. So basically you press the mirror lockup button, and that opens up the barn doors and moves the mirror out of the way, and pretty much just closes the leaf shutter on the lens. And then when you press the button, it's just the leaf shutter in the lens that's working. So you're getting you're reducing the amount of vibration through your camera. So on the side here as well, we've also got the ability to attach camera straps, which is cool. And there's also an ability to put a holder on here. There's an ISO setting here for camera flash sync. There's also a PC sync here for digital backs and flashes. And what else have we got? All the functions other than what I've described so far are on the lens. So you focus on the lens, you set the aperture on the lens, and you also set the shutter speed on the lens, and they're all there on the front of the lens for you to set. And there's also a PC sync on the lens, and you can use that for a flash and a digital back. There's also a depth of field check. You can just push that down and that checks your depth of field. There's also a sync button between shutter speed and aperture. So I mean, this is quite good for if you're doing portraits. So say for example you've got your portrait settings and you're working with 500th of a second and you're f2.8 and you're doing some portraits, but you think, well, maybe f2.8 is too shallow. I want to just bump up the aperture setting just to make sure that I'm getting enough depth of field. So there's a little button on here that locks the aperture and the shutter speed together. So you just press them and move them up to, you can move the aperture up to f4 and it moves the shutter speed at the same time to 250th of a second. it just adds extra speed to the system when you're working with the camera. There's also another button here on the side, a red one. So with this camera as well, there is an ability to use these lenses on the 200 and 2000 series cameras, and those cameras have the shutter built into the actual body. They're a different type of lens. It's still the same mount, but the 200 and 2000 series cameras don't have leaf shutters in the lenses. But what's quite good about this system is that you can use these lenses on the 200 and 2000 series cameras, and to do that you just basically use this button here, and you basically put the setting into F mode, and that basically locks the leaf shutter out, so you can't use it, and it just operates as an aperture setting only, which is quite good. So you've got some interoperability there as well, which is good. What else have we got? The fact that this camera system is modular, so you can pretty much put the dark slide back in so we can take the film back off. It's modular, so you can basically pull this camera apart, and you can take off the top viewfinder. You can get different viewfinders, you can take off the lens, and that is pretty much the body. In there we've got a focus screen. This one's an acute matte defocus screen. It's very good in low light situations. It's got a little prism type focus split hair screen in there, which works quite well. It operates similar, very similar to like a rangefinder type system where you just line the two up, and it also has this little ring that kind of makes things a bit hazy, and when you're focusing it brings them into sharpness. There's probably a technical term, name for that, but I don't know what it is. You can also take this out, you just flick out these little clips in here, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want fingerprints on my focus screen, but you can basically take that out, you can change it for other ones, you can clean it. And that's pretty much it. So we'll just quickly put that back together. Oh, the other thing just to quickly mention is you need to take the back off to put this back in and out. So put that back in, line that up. And there we go. Oh, the other thing to mention is the focus screen. So this is the waist level viewfinder. It basically just folds down nice and easily, and you just flick it up when you want to use it. And you basically, this just helps you to look down on the focus screen, and it just makes it dark so you can see it nice and brightly. And in there as well, is you just press a little button just here, and there's a little critical focus magnifier that pops up, so you can use that to focus down on the focus screen, which works quite well. And just to mention, when you're using the waist level viewfinder, the image appears through the viewfinder the right way round, meaning that if you're working with, let's say, like a view camera, the image will be upside down and the wrong way round. This is the right way up, but it's the wrong way round. So left is actually right and right is left, but it is the right way up from a vertical point of view, if you know what I mean. And that's it. That is the Hasselblad 503CW general operating procedures. If you think I've missed anything there, or if you've got any questions, please leave a comment down below and I will respond as I normally do. So let's talk about the amazing lenses you can get for the Hasselblad 500 series cameras. And they truly are amazing because they are all made by Carl Zeiss. So straight out of the box, you're getting really high quality glass in these lenses. As I've already said, they are a leaf shutter lens, so not only are you getting less camera vibration through the camera when you're using the mirror lockup feature, but if you're a portrait photographer, you'll be pleased to know that you get PC sync on your flash through the full range of the shutter speed of these lenses, which is from a second all the way up to 500th of a second. There are a number of different prime lenses available for this camera system. They start off at 30mm, which is the widest angle lens you can get, which I think is about 20-21mm, and they go all the way up to 500mm, which I think is 300 or 350mm. There's different variations of the same lens. As these cameras have been updated over the years, because they've been around for a long time, so have the lenses. And there's different acronyms that attach to the lens, name that enable you to see which are the newer and the older lenses. So they started off with the older ones, they were a version C. They then moved up to version CF, which is this type of lens here. And then they moved up to the CFI, which is this type of lens here. And then they moved up to a CFE, which is this lens here. And what's unique about the CFE lens, it has the contacts on the back of the lens, so that when you put it on the body, it syncs with the electronics in the body of the 503CW. And when you have a digital back on the camera, there's no need for a PC sync cable. So all the electronics are within the camera already. And when you use the CFE lenses, they just work with that camera. There's then the FLE lenses, and this is going to get a bit confusing. So many acronyms, right? So you've got the CF lens. There's also an FLE version of this lens, and now FLE means floating lens element. And in the CFI lenses, which is this lens here, there's also FLE versions of this lens. Now this lens is an FLE version, and basically it has two ways of focusing. You have the main focus, and then at the top here there's another setting that you can set. So basically when you're doing close focusing, so say for example we're focusing between half a meter and a meter, we can set the firstly we set the top setting to between 0.5, so half a meter and 0.8 meters, and then we go ahead and focus the lens within that range. And basically when you're close focusing, it boosts the sharpness in the corner of the images by using the floating lens element, which is great for when you're doing close-ups. As we've already talked about, all the controls of these lenses are on the lenses themselves. So that's shutter speed, its aperture, and its focusing capabilities. And as we've already said, all these lenses can be used on the 200 and 2000 series lenses. So let's talk about the different accessories you can get for the Hasselblad 500 series cameras, and there are a lot. My camera came with this book. So this is basically a book of accessories, and as you can see there are a number of different accessories that you can get. And I was looking through this earlier, and it's kind of mind-blowing really, of the different types of accessories you can get. So I made a note of the ones that are worth mentioning, and we'll just quickly go through that. So there are a number of different film backs you can get. There are an A12 backs, and you can get those for 120 and 220 roll film, and that's basically a 6x6 back, so you get 12 shots, which is A12. So there's A12 backs for 120 and 220. There's also A16 backs for 120 and 220, and they're basically a 645 type back, and you get 16 shots with those. There might be a 35mm back as well, but I'm not too sure. I've never seen one. There's also a Polaroid back you can get, which is quite cool. If you like Polaroids, you can still get those. There's also extension tube and bellows if you're doing kind of macro work, which is quite good. There's different focus screens in there that you can get. There's prism finders that you can get, so you can take off the back, take this out, and you can put a prism finder like this in, which is good. And then you can put this on, so you can actually look through the camera, which is quite nice. I use this all the time. And what else? There's grips you can get, and electric winders, so if you like using a grip, then you can get one of those. There's different filters that you can get. Now if you're going to attach like graduated natural density filters and to the front of this camera, you'll need to buy the dedicated bayonet type filter attachments. So all these lenses have their own filter mount type, so they're either a B50, a B60 or a B70, and you just basically go on eBay and you find like a B60 to 58mm step up adapter. You put that on, and then you would screw in your 58mm filter holder adapter onto the front of that, and that's basically how you attach your filters. You can get an underwater housing for this if you want to really take it underwater. I would be brave. I probably wouldn't take mine underwater, but you can also get a thing called a flex body, which is quite cool for if you're doing landscape work or architectural work. And basically the flex body replaces the main camera body of the camera, and it basically operates like a view camera. So you put a lens on it and you put a back on it. It's got a focus screen on the back, and you can adjust it like a view camera. So you've got rise and fall and tilt and shift adjustability. So what are my favourite things about this camera? Well, there's a few, and we've already talked about a few of them. So just to recap, the favourite thing I love about this camera the most is the fact that it is 6x6 format or square crop. And if you've been on my YouTube channel, or you follow me on Instagram or Twitter, or even checked out the gallery on my website, you'll see that all my images are square format. It's because I really do love and appreciate that format. And I really like the fact that this camera has interchangeable backs. You know, being a landscape photographer shooting film, it's great to have options when shooting film. So I can have one holder with colour and one holder with black and white, which is great. So I really do appreciate that. I really like the fact that it's an SLR design, meaning that when I'm looking through the viewfinder, I'm actually looking at the image through the lens, so I'm seeing what I'm going to expose. And it's also great for when I'm using graduated natural density filters, because when I put the filter in on the lens, I can see the effect on the image straight away. It's a really high quality and well-made system. It's really robust and it's very reliable. I haven't had any issues with mine, and the reason why I went for the Hasselblad 503CW is because it was the last fully mechanical camera they ever made, and it fixed all the legacy issues of the previous camera systems, and so that's another reason why I purchased it. There's some things that I'm not that keen about with this camera system. The first thing to mention is its weight and its size. Now, the camera body itself is not that heavy, but by the time you put on the prism finder and you put on a lens, particularly the wide angle and telephoto lenses, these are really heavy lenses, and it's just combined, it's just quite a heavy system. And when you actually put all these things together, you know, it's quite a bulky system. It takes up a lot of weight in my camera bag. The other things that I'm not that keen on is the fact that you have to buy these special filter adapters for these lenses. Hasselblad has its own in-house bayonet mounting system, so to attach a screw filter on here, you have to first buy one of their bayonet mounting filters or a Hasselblad filter. So if I want to use my graduated natural density filters, I have to buy a bayonet step-up ring. So for example, a B60 step-up ring to a 58mm ring. So you put that in, and then I would screw in my 58mm filter adapter ring, and that's how you attach filters. When I first got this, I found it quite tricky to operate for two reasons really. The first one being the viewfinder. I wasn't used to this. You know, I'm used to an SLR or a rangefinder system where when I look through the camera, I pretty much see what I'm going to get. But also the fact that this image was flipped around, that was quite tricky to compose. And also with this waist level viewfinder, it has a diopter in there, and these diopters are specific to your eyes. This is a natural one, so 0, and they go, I think, from -3 all the way up to +3, and it turns out I'm like a -2 or a -3, so this one doesn't work for me, and I was finding that I was missing focus on some of my images, which is part of the reason why I went to this viewfinder, because this viewfinder has an adjustable diopter built into it. In terms of the operation of the camera, you know, if you're like me and you've come from a digital camera or an SLR, a traditional SLR type camera, you're used to holding the camera with this hand and using the trigger with this hand and then focusing with this hand. But with this camera, it's the other way around. The operation of the camera, it took some time to get used to. You hold it in this hand, you operate the trigger with this hand unless you're using the cable release, and you focus with this hand. So you would look through and you would focus, and then you would let the trigger go with this finger. So that took some time to get used to. It's something you can overcome quite quickly, but it was difficult at the start. The other thing that I don't like about this camera is the fact that it doesn't have a built-in light meter, and I guess that can be a strength in some ways, because there are no electronics in this camera, so it's fully mechanical, so it's very reliable. But because of that, it means that it doesn't have a lighting meter, and I'm okay with that because when I'm doing landscapes, mostly I'm using a light meter. I have a dedicated light meter, but sometimes it would just be nice to have it built in so that I can just get out and shoot and just do general shots. You know, compose up and then just let the shutter go in automatic mode and it would just take the shot with the correct light meter reading. But because there isn't a built-in meter, you can't do that. So you have to use a handheld light meter, either in a phone or a proper light meter. And then the final thing to mention, it's an expensive camera system, particularly if you're going to go for some of the newer, like the CW and some of the newer lenses. You know, you can spend a lot of money on this camera system, so it's not affordable for everyone. So I totally understand that. It is expensive, and I see that as a negative thing. So who is this camera for? Well, I guess this camera would suit a lot of people. If you're a portrait photographer, a landscape photographer, a nature photographer, macro shooter, and you like shooting film, or even with the older cameras and the digital back, I think you would really appreciate this camera, especially if you do all those things, because the camera system's so flexible and it does all those things so well. If you're a street photographer, I probably wouldn't recommend this camera because it is bulky and the ergonomics I don't think they lend themselves that well to street photography shooting. Not that I'm a street photographer shooter myself, so if you think differently, please leave a comment down below and put me right on that point. That's totally fine. And it's you know, I think it's a well-known and popular camera, and it attracts a lot of attention. So if you want to do some street photography and you're looking to be a bit inconspicuous about that, you're going to struggle with this camera for that reason. So big question is, will I keep this camera? Well, for the reasons that I don't like this camera is part of the reasons why I don't want to keep this camera. Being a landscape photographer, I like to be out, I like backpacking, I like being mobile, and I've got quite a quick style of shooting. I like to really work the scene when I'm out shooting the landscape, and because of the size and the form factor of this camera, I feel like it holds me back. And even though I appreciate the interchangeable backs and the 6x6 format, I think there's other cameras that can do that for me, and so I've decided to change. And hang on a second. So here we have, nearly dropped it on the floor. So here we have my new camera system. It's a Mamiya 6, which is a 6x6 format rangefinder camera system. So it's the same format as the Hasselblad, but it's a rangefinder system. As you know, I used to shoot a Mamiya 7, so I kind of feel comfortable with this, and I recently picked this up. So if you would like to see an unboxing video of this, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment down below, because I'm planning on doing an unboxing video of the Mamiya 6. I was really lucky to be able to pick this camera up, and also it came with the original boxes. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's covered everything that you would want to know about the Hasselblad 503CW, and also some of the other attributes to the 500 series camera system. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. If you like the video, please subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, you don't have to give me any information. All you've got to do is press the red button down below with the subscribe words on it, and it helps the channel, it helps to grow the channel, and you just get notified when I upload a video. If you don't want to go that far, that's totally fine, but if you really like the video, please give it a thumbs up. That's the minimum thing you can do. Supports the channel and keeps these videos going. So that's it for today's video. I hope you have a great new year, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.